Everybody, welcome to my talk, Defense in Depth, a mile wide, a mile deep. Hope everyone's having a good time. Thanks for coming out. I know it's Sunday and you're missing your normal Sunday ritual, so this is a pretty cool event, the fact that we have so many people showing up and coming out on a weekend. So about myself, I'm Ryan Buenaventura, IT Security and Compliance Manager for a large local government entity. I've been a senior security analyst at a Fortune 200 company that dealt with transactions for oil, and a litigation services company that protected a lot of different intellectual property patents that were part of lawsuits that were never ever to make it out into the open. So we dealt with a lot of sensitive data and patents. Probably I've seen a lot of the companies around here that a lot of you work on. I work for a computer forensic software company out in California as a senior security analyst. If you look it up, it was after they had their major breach, just to clarify. And I have my bachelor's of IT at UCF, so you can finish. And go Knights. It's kind of cool being up here, actually. I'm really enjoying the experience so far. Oh, sorry. I'm my CISSP, my EnCE certified examiner, and I'm a CISA. Just a quick show of hands, how many people here are new to information security, getting into it, or relatively new? Okay, so a few. I saw a lot of college students yesterday. So, the talk. Mile wide, a mile deep. For some of you, you're probably familiar with defense in depth strategy already, so this might be a refresher, but what I did was I tried to put in some tips and tricks for some of you that do this day in, day out, to see if it can help you, because what I like to do is when I attend talks, I like to try to get at least one thing that I can take with me back to work. So hopefully I can do that. So a colleague was, I'm sorry, stepping away from the mic. A colleague was preparing for the CISSP exam, and she brought up the famous quote, "A mile wide, an inch deep." And if you know the Sean Harris book, which I'm sure a lot of you that have taken the CISSP or prepared for it, you know the term and you know the exam. And it really is a mile wide, an inch deep. She was stressing about this, terribly stressing about it, and it's somebody that I hired 2.5 years ago as a junior analyst, and she has come a really long way, really good with servers, really good with operating systems, and just, she knows her stuff. She just hasn't had a lot of experience with security. So anyways, in the last 2.5 years, she has easily gone a mile deep in pretty much every aspect of security. Anything that our team does, log monitoring, vulnerability analysis, web app vulnerability scanning, things that she probably never imagined she'd do, or anyone in security probably didn't think they were going to be dipping their hands into, would go into. So I thought it was kind of funny that she was stressing so much about this exam. But it's understandable because the exam is not a walk in the park. The quote, I always thought that was an interesting quote that was used in the beginning of that Sean Harris book. It goes as far back as 1890 by an American humorist to describe the Platte River. It has a very large circulation but very little influence. Covers a good deal of ground, but it's not deep. In some places it's a mile wide and 3/4 of an inch deep. So it's basically saying people know a lot about everything, but nothing about a given topic. I think it's kind of interesting that they always use that to describe the CISSP, because you're supposed to know everything and you're certifying as a professional. Our field, it's uniquely complex. It's multidisciplinary, basically that whole mile-wide concept. All these terms up here, everyone in this room, it seems like a majority are in security already. You've dealt with a lot of these terms. You deal with them day in, day out. You know them. You eat them for breakfast. These terms as well, more or less going towards compliance, NIST standards, HIPAA. There's just a lot of disciplines to cover in what we do. A lot of areas where we're expected to know all this information, or at least know where to get it. Critical decision making, another thing that makes our area uniquely complex. If you think about a traditional IT group like a service desk, let's say they mess up a service ticket. What's the worst that happens? They don't meet their SLAs. You think about a level 1 junior analyst reviewing your firewall logs or your SIM, and they miss a exfiltration in plain sight, huge amounts of data. What's the repercussions of that? Every decision is critical. If you're a mid-level analyst even, and you're called to go and check out a workstation, do forensics, whatever tool you have, EnCE, FTK, and you're taking a look at the machine and you miss an indicator of compromise that you should have got, what's going to happen next? How many more machines are going to be infected? How many more machines? Or is that the main pivot into the network? Everything we do in security, everything we look at, it's strange how that is, but one mistake and who knows what can happen. And then when I say at every level, just think about going at the manager level personally. If I don't do enough to fight for budget for training for my staff, and now they don't know the latest threats, the latest trends, the latest malware, how to reverse it, then now what does that mean? We can't keep up with guys that aren't sleeping at night, that are just hacking away. If you go to the CTF room, I don't know how late they were out there, but I'm sure they were there pretty late. And then finally, moving all the way to the top, your C-level, when they're looking at your budget and they decide your operating budget, your regular renewals, your SIM, they say, you know what, I'm sorry, the business isn't doing well, you gotta lose your SIM. How many people here would be in straight panic? What would you do without a SIM these days if you're used to having a SIM? We're expected to be experts. This is, and I'm sure everyone in here has experienced this, where, if people aren't coming to you because they can't figure it out on their own, and I'm talking about other IT groups, they typically will come to the security team because you get all the logs, you may notice some anomalies, and they can leverage that. And if you do security right, you really do become that trusted advisor. But that can backfire sometimes because something happens and then everybody is of the opinion, how did you let that happen? You're the expert. What happened there? How did you miss that? We're paid to be paranoid. That we were just talking about that in the beginning. Andrew right up front here is the most paranoid guy I know. That's what makes our job really unique, in that our salary is based on that paranoia and how much we're paranoid. I mean, if you, I'll say this, my boss always asks me this question, how do you sleep at night? Because we have a good communication. I tell him everything that's going on. He doesn't understand everything. He doesn't, he has his own perceived risks, but he knows that our group has to stay paranoid, and he knows that's what he pays us for that. Actual risk and perceived risk. There's Bruce Schneier, who writes a lot about this. To make good quality decisions, security professionals must accurately account for risk and differing perceptions. Every person in your organization has different experiences, thoughts, skills, and it's your job as a security evangelist to convey what the real risk is, because that's what they understand. They don't understand, risk equals threat times the famous equation. They just want to know, all right, how are they going to get in? What are they going to do? How bad is it going to be? How does that affect my department? And every department within your organization is going to have different perceived risks. So that's a tough part of the job, to weigh actual risk versus perceived risk. So based off of all of that, defense in-depth strategy allows you to deal with this complexity. Going a mile deep is the only way to be effective in your defense in-depth strategy. Now, the talk is only 45 minutes, so I'm not going to be able to cover a mile deep and all the things I'm talking about, but I can start to, for those of you that haven't gone a mile deep in certain areas. And I picked a couple areas in particular and a couple cases in particular for this talk. So what we're going to cover: what is defense in depth? For those that are new to it, why defense in depth? How do you apply it? A couple cases and reasons for defense in depth, non-Home Depot, Target, or Sony. I like to look at things that are not really talked about, because those are the things I find I can most relate to. I don't want to relate to a Target or a Home Depot or a Sony. Tips on starting to dig a mile deep for those of you that are new to it. And as I said, hopefully you can pick up one thing from this talk. So what is defense in depth? It's a strategy of adding layers of controls and safeguards so that if one fails, you can rely on the backup control. The most simple extreme example, which I'm sure everyone has heard of, is you have two firewalls from different vendors. If an exploit gets through firewall A, it won't affect B, and an attack on firewall A wouldn't get through firewall B. That's an extreme example that I don't know how many of you or your organizations have this. Strangely, whenever I evaluate a cloud provider or SaaS vendor for our organization, I always get this architecture document, and it's Checkpoint and then Juniper, and they're at the front, and then you start to ask them questions, and you say, oh, okay, so what's your patching like? What are you running on Checkpoint? And then they're like, oh, R29. What's going on here? Yeah, why you go with two firewalls, but you're not patching them? So why defense in depth? It protects against and helps detect your attacker. Every layer of defense is a chance at stopping or detecting, because your people are going to click on those links. They are going to get phished. There's been a lot of other talks that talk about that. It's not hard for that to happen. So, you want your web content filtering systems in place. You want your IPS. You want to pick up all the things that your people at the front were not able to see. So how do you apply defense in depth? You consider your attacker and their motivators, because everyone is different. And you build your layers through people, process, and technology. People are critical. They're critical control through senior management commitment, because you got to get in the buy-in of your management. If you don't have the buy-in of your management, then it is a very, very difficult job to secure an organization, because pretty much you're the only person crying wolf. Your people, of course, end users are your first line of defense. And then process, keeping your defenses up to date, and we'll go more into that. Technology covers the area where people and process aren't feasible to cover. Your IDS, your IPS, your DLP, all the systems that we've been talking about through this weekend. So your attackers and their motivators. Before you can apply defense in-depth strategy, you got to be aware of the attackers and their motivators. Some motivators: financial gain, social injustice, hacktivism. It's a common thing in the news these days. Pride, reputation, malicious intent, and then of course state-sponsored espionage, where we see all the news with the White House, Russia, China, and the like. You never know what'll happen. So just looking into a couple social injustice, hacktivism cases, and it's something, again, I can relate to because I'm in a large local government entity. You have Dane County, a shooting of an unarmed man by police officers. You also have this in the news recently with South Carolina. You have the city of Fort Lauderdale. They create a new law against feeding the homeless and arrest a veteran when he goes out to feed the homeless. I can't speak for these counties, but I can tell you that in my organization, no one imagined that was going to happen as far as the repercussions. So we look at Dane County, and you've got attacks that blocked official communications, their internet, their email, some police and fire dispatch services. So just imagine that. There's this event that occurs, and all of a sudden you have Anonymous and some hacktivist group taking out all your operations as a county government. Your county government is responsible for your 911 system. They're responsible for a lot of things: traffic lights, substance abuse treatment, protected health information, wastewater, drinking water, SCADA systems, Port of Everglades. A lot of people don't know that the airports, your major airports, are run by your county. Now, it may be a separate agency, division, but it's the county. And when you undergo attacks, they see that, oh, Orange County Commission, there's their IP block. They're not saying, okay, well, I really want to get back at the police department or the sheriff. They're just attacking, and they're taking down whatever they can. And in this case, they took down a lot of things. And that's just a scary thought, to think that they can take out police and fire dispatch services. City of Fort Lauderdale, so they set out the law against feeding the homeless. And basically what happened was Anonymous posted a video on YouTube. When you have a chance, take a look at that video. It's pretty interesting. I watched it with our public communications officer. Disclaimer, I do not work for these counties or cities. And the first thing she said was, "Oh my goodness, this is like terrorist. Who are these guys? What do we do?" And the video is pretty creepy. And then she said, "What are you going to do with my computer? Do you need to confiscate my computer?" I go, "No, I think you're all right. Don't worry." So what happened as a result of that? And you also have to consider that a lot of local governments and smaller municipalities, they're not going to have a lot of large security teams, if any. I know Fort Lauderdale was posting up for a CISO for quite a while. I don't know if they ever filled that. But what was interesting in this case is the $430,000 in remediation, so $500,000. So your websites are taken down. Actually, what was also interesting is they made the decision. They said, "You want to shut us down? Okay, we'll go ahead and shut down our servers." So they shut down their servers, which, what kind of solution is that? But $430,000 in remediation, a majority of it was consulting. If you look at it in this particular article from the Sun Sentinel, or you do your own public records request to get more information, which you can do that with a lot of government agencies, and you can get a lot of helpful information from that. $430,000. So this event happens, and all of a sudden your sites are down, and now let's spend $430,000 to correct the problem. Odds are they're going to get attacked again. And I don't know that $430,000 is going to stop that attack. That's it's a little disheartening, especially if you're a taxpayer in that city. Alrighty, defense in-depth strategies for DDoS. So looking at that situation where they had DDoS, what I did was I just put a quick little, all right, if you went an inch deep, you tell your analyst, hey, go research DDoS and put it in our incident response plan, and don't add much more information than that. But if you really want to dig a mile deep, you need to do a couple things. So from the people layer of defense in depth, work with your networking team. In a recent DDoS attack I went under, one of my networking people could not get the packet capture. Our firewall was maintaining state, our CPU was running incredibly high, he couldn't do anything. He didn't have a plan to get back inside if this situation occurred. Work with them. They're willing to work with you, especially after something happens. Because after this happens, they're coming to you because you're the expert. What do we do next time? Set up your procedure. Tell them to document it. Tell them to, all right, what do you have? You have an edge router? Can you do it from the edge router? Do we need to buy a span port? Do we need another box out there that is just, no IP, just sitting there sniffing? You got to get with these guys and you got to work this out and you got to get it documented so that you can react quicker. Work with your management and communications, your PR office on damage control. If you take a closer look at what Fort Lauderdale and Dane County did, shut down your servers. The mayor goes on TV and he says, we're undergoing attack, we shut down everything. It just, it looked like they didn't know what they were doing. You need to be prepared to let your customers, your constituents know that you're reacting and you're doing something about it, even if not much is happening right away, which is the case in DDoS. It can take you down for a while. So, research the latest DDoS attacks on what mitigations to prevent. Check with your ISP on a procedure to quickly null route or black hole the offending traffic. This is a quick tip, but you'd be surprised how many people have never gone under a DDoS and don't know who the right person to call or the right person to escalate at your ISP. Some ISPs, you're going to call them and you're going to get the wrong person, and they're going to have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean null route? Oh, I don't know. I got to escalate that to the networking team. And some of them just are, depending on your ISP and what kind of tier they are, they're just not going to have experience dealing with this. So technology. ACLs at your internet edge router. And this is really just kind of your ongoing research, review, keep up with the latest DDoS attacks. In the SSDP attack, which you'll always see from source port 1900, it'll be UDP, and it'll be going to your web server that they want to take down. There's no reason for that traffic. Take it out at the edge. Don't do it at the firewall, because firewall is maintaining state, and your CPU is going to jump up, and you'll have the same problem. So Do it at your edge router. And again, that also comes in with people working with your network team, showing them what happened. Create your incident report. If you don't have an incident report, use your threat intelligence. Those talker yesterday was talking about how they print out those guides that show you the typical signs of the attack. Explain that, walk it through with them, because your networking team is there just to make sure things are up. They're not there to understand those attacks. But once you explain it to them, they know the layers, they know the protocols, and then they go, oh, I can just do this. That's a 5-minute change. All right, we're doing pretty well with SDP now, NTP as well. Those are some of the attacks I've seen personally anyways. And there are obviously several other ways to do it. And then check with DDoS mitigation vendors on what's offered for your environment. In our organization, we have 2 different circuits for our egress points, and one vendor has nothing, like nothing. They didn't even know who to refer to. And I don't know if it was we just caught the wrong salesperson there, but they didn't have anything. And then they sent us to their engineer who said, oh, I think we can null route, which doesn't help you because you're down. But what's great about the mitigation vendors is, they handle all of the direct scrubbing and allow legitimate traffic to still pass through. So you can either go to a third party. You got companies like Prolexic, which I think got acquired by Akamai. You have doing it in-house, Arbor Networks. If you're a large organization, you can get your own scrubbers. That's if you have staff to manage that. And there's a lot of other vendors. Defense and depth strategies for threat intelligence. This has been a big common theme I've seen over the last couple conferences I've attended. And, going in inches, subscribing to a feed. Starting to dig a mile deep, you have your community. Participate in your community. Share, knowledge share. That's why I attend these conferences. That's why I speak with a lot of people. When I have a particular issue, I always like to see what other people are doing for that. And I've learned a lot of new things that way. That's one of the easiest ways for me personally, doing threat intelligence, I guess, at a low level. Join an ISAC. That's been talked about a lot during this conference. Information sharing and analysis group. They're funded by, the particular one that we use is funded by Homeland Security, or at least they sponsor it for several things. It's pretty good. We just finished the application to join for it, and there's a ISAC for everything. Financial services, health, you name it. It seems like there's an ISAC for whatever field you're in or whatever organizations you cover. I've called up a lot of references to validate that it was in fact a helpful group. Check back with me in a couple months because our application just went through, and I could tell you firsthand, but from what I've heard directly from other people, they've leveraged it. They have dedicated analysts that you can send packet captures to. I've verified that other organizations are doing that and leveraging that because they just don't have the knowledge in-house. ISSA, we got president of South Florida ISSA here and several board members. Great group. We meet once a month. We do a lot of networking. We learn a lot of new things. We do a lot of knowledge sharing. HTCIA, High Tech Crime Investigation Association. That there's a lot of law enforcement there, but there's a big push to have more InfoSec people there because if you look at the crimes these days, the financial gain crimes, follow the money, you hear it, Bitcoin, it always involves something that the traditional LE forensic investigator never had to worry about. ISACA, compliance, InfraGard, mailing lists, basically get involved. Reach out to your internal IT groups, ask them about any strange activity. Several times I've heard from our server team where they say, hey, you know what, this particular IIS server's acting funny. I know you get all the logs. Can you see if anything has changed? When you return the favor and, even if it's not a security related topic, you'll end up seeing that they become your hands-on eyes and ears right on the systems. And in fact, in one case at a past company, all our security systems didn't catch something in particular, and a server admin was on, and he just saw this funny icon on there, and next thing we knew, we had a big problem. Seminars, conferences, B-Sides Orlando, you're all here, I don't need to tell you that.
Process: review the latest security threats and trends, reviews of breaches and root cause. I consider this a big part of going mile deep. I meet with my team every week. We look at what's out there in the news. We look at what's posted on SANS. We look at the InfraGard bulletins. It's the only way that we can make sure that there's nothing funny going on our network. We search for those strings. We look for those DNS queries. We look if anyone's visited those sites in our web content filtering system. But we do it weekly. We never used to do that in the past, but I found since we've done that, we've really got ahead of things that are published or just got in time. HHS Wall of Shame, it's just another source. The Department of Health and Human Services, in my organization, again, we deal with a lot of protected health information, and this information, other than being protected by HIPAA, just can't get out. It's people's livelihoods, it's their medical conditions, it's their privacy. The HHS Wall of Shame is good because they keep it up to date. It's anybody, any breach over 500 records, by law, it's required to be posted up on their, it's called the Wall of Shame. It's basically a breach notification site. Technology: monitor internet, Twitter, Pastebin, do Google hacking on your organization. It's interesting when you look through Pastebin and you look at your domain names and you find, employees are registering for these forums or mailing lists that end up getting compromised and has nothing to do with your organization, but they're using their, company email for that. ISACs also monitor the underground sites that you may not typically monitor. Again, they have some dedicated analysts and threat feeds. And subscribe to commercial feeds or services. There was a great talk on that yesterday. It can be a lot of money, and there are a lot of vendors out there supplying this now. Here is the Wall of Shame. This is a screenshot from last night so you can see how current it is. I use it a lot, especially if you're in the health side of things. It's every time we go through this with our business owners in our different health agencies, substance abuse, sexual assault treatment, you name it. If someone's being treated in the community for it, then there is probably a service in a county organization for it. But when you go through these with them and you sit down and you evangelize security and compliance, and you look at these incidents, you look at this, what's happening here, paper, think clean desk policy. Everyone in the health field relates automatically to every one of these incidents because they're dealing with this day in, day out. Going to wrong fax numbers because they're not programmed. There's a lot of things there. And that's a whole nother discussion, HIPAA and security in the health realm. One particular one that was on there, just to segue into defense in depth for lost or stolen devices, this adult and pediatric dermatology company, they had a $150,000 fine because they had a stolen thumb drive from an employee's vehicle. I just think that's amazing. Like HHS, after you do the breach, they have to go in and do an investigation. So it was just a USB drive. Probably, how much are they these days? $10, depending on the size. And then all of a sudden, now you've got a $150,000 fine. You've got HHS on your back going through all the safeguards and having you attest that you're doing all these things. And of course, they immediately find that you're not doing it, which is why you get the $150,000 fine. So it's just another interesting scenario. So defense in depth for lost or stolen devices. Instruct the user to report it stolen. That's, going an inch deep. People. Train your employees on all your policies, unattended devices, clean desk policy and language in those policies. You got to train them on it or they won't know it, and then they'll leave their laptop in their car, or they'll leave it in the, they won't leave it right in the main part, but they'll put it in the trunk. But I can tell you of several incidents I've had to personally deal with where they were followed from our company's parking lot to a mall to meet with clients, and next thing you know, they come back to their car and the trunk is popped and the laptop's gone. Immediately send awareness reminders when multiple devices are lost or stolen. It's your quickest way to get an effective message out, because then people are already talking about it. They're saying, oh my goodness, one scenario, we had multiple laptops stolen from a trunk of a car. It gets it out there quick. People stop doing that. They leave it at work when they're meeting with clients and they just cable lock it, or they just don't bring it with them. Process, conduct regular audits of your assets. You should have a centralized inventory, asset management 101. In some of our more critical areas, our group takes it upon themselves to create a spreadsheet, and we basically hire part-timers to go through, regularly audit. It's a cheap, cost-effective way to make sure all your USB drives that are allowed, your laptops, and actually at the same time that we do that, we have them go through and make sure they're BitLockered. We got encryption. If it's not BitLockered, it somehow missed the policy, and we got to push that through. That's there were some talks yesterday about getting FTEs. It's very difficult to argue for a full-time position in security and compliance. So I get around that by calling on college interns, whether they're free or paid, or using contractors or part-time people to just go around and do these things where you don't have the time to deal with this. You can't go touch every machine, but they can touch every machine. File a police report. Maintain your incidents. File a police report. You should always do that with a stolen laptop. When you eventually run into one missing device, a second one, a third, then a fourth, and there's a pattern that develops, you want to make sure you have that first police report, because when you take this to HR and legal and you say, all right, we have a serious problem here, we have assets missing, here's my documentation, here's my incident report, and on top of that, here's my police report. It's pretty much an open shut case. You don't have a police report, you don't have this documentation, it's not an open and shut case, and then they're asking you more questions. And if you provide this, I also find that you don't have to go through any kind of depositions or anything like that. It's really what documentation is about, just having everything there and ready. Lost or stolen devices, MDM. How many people here have an MDM solution, mobile device management? It's slowly growing. People are still getting a feel for it. There's so many different devices out there, it's hard to select one. But if you don't have one and you have Exchange and you're in an Exchange environment, you can do some things there. You can do a remote wipe of a device. You set up your policy, everyone signs off on it. If they're using organization-owned or personally owned devices, still have them sign off on it because they're using county or organizational email, and that has your data on it. And depending on what that person does, there could be some sensitive data in there. Register, Find My iPhone, this is just making sure you're covered, going a mile deep in lost or stolen devices, researching everything you can do if you don't have an MDM. These are all things you can do. And encrypt your devices. Obviously, if you don't enable passcodes, and you can also enable passcodes through Exchange, then that encryption is pointless. BitLocker, and this more or less applies to your laptops and your Windows laptops and your USB devices if you're a Windows shop. You can set your BitLocker policy, you can use MBAM to manage your keys, and it's all pretty much built into your enterprise agreement depending on what level you are. Phishing threats. So going an inch deep, hitting the spam button, sending to your vendor or sending it to your junk folder depending on how you're set up and who your spam vendor is. So people, we send out monthly newsletters on phishing. Basically, we look at the latest ones that came out and the latest ones that our users are falling for, and we send it out pretty regularly. And that has gone a long way because there are a lot of people that reply back to that and they say, oh, I just saw this, or oh, here's another one. And your anti-spam vendor is not going to catch all your phishing emails. It's just impossible. Phish your own people through a third party or do it in-house. Metasploit has a module, you can do it with that. Or there's a lot of PhishMe, a lot of different platforms. They're a little pricey. This doesn't take a lot to do on your own. So I would recommend just going that route, especially if you're just doing it here, there, maybe getting people that are repeat offenders that are always, their quota is always over the limit and they're always putting in their password on that Google page that was set up. Process. Give your organization's workforce a way to report phishing email to your anti-spam vendor. With our anti-spam vendor, it's pretty cool. They have a plugin that you can install into Outlook, and we just rolled that out. You can put multiple buttons and set it up to different ways. So we have a button for reporting spam directly, and we have a button for reporting phishing. So reporting spam, those false positives and whatnot, they go straight up to the vendor. Reporting phishing, they get routed through security. I always want to see what phishing scams are going out. I want to see what that link is. I want to see if our web content filtering system is working. I want to see if my antivirus catches whatever that drive-by malware was or whatever happened. So, I'm big on that. Develop a procedure to quickly block reported phishing scams. This is just, it's a formality, it's a process, it just makes things the same. If I'm out or someone else is out on the team, they follow the procedure to the T. All right, sandbox, click this link, let's see where it goes. All right, what's next? Block it in our web content filtering system. Work with your spam vendor, press them to ask for more info if things still aren't blocked. They'll probably ask you for the headers, the original email, anybody else get it. If they don't give you much of a response, just keep pressing them. You're paying them for it. If they're not working out for you, move to another one. It's not that hard to switch to anti-spam vendors. I mean, everything is, even if you're going in the hybrid model and you're moving your email to Office 365 or whatnot, you have a lot of different options for routing your mail and picking your vendor. Technology, play with your reputation filtering sensitivity on your anti-spam appliance or your service. You can get this to the point where people tend to say, okay, let me go with the highest. Oh, it's blocking all our mail distribution stuff and all these emails that legitimately need to come in that are spoofed because they're coming from another cloud vendor. You can play with that and you can get to a point where you can reduce it a lot. Web content filtering to block the links. That's just your layers of defense in depth within technology. And your IPS can block known bad DNS queries as part of that phishing link when you click it. It doesn't have to be all about the web content filtering. You can set your reputation in your IPS so that it's really sensitive, but of course you get a lot of false positives. We all deal with false positives. And then taking it the next step up, threat emulation or behavioral monitoring systems. These are, over the last couple years, you've seen them, a lot of different vendors. They're all pretty much the same. They roll it in a VM or they look for indicators of compromise. And those are things that obviously you as an analyst can't just do on your own in an expedient manner. Defense in-depth strategies for human error or fraud. Going an inch deep is check marking. We're doing separation of duties. Going a mile deep, starting to. Know and communicate your organization's applicable laws and regulations. You'd be surprised how many people in your organization have no idea what laws apply. You got HIPAA, you got PCI, you got this year, the main focus is the Florida Information Protection Act, which if you're taking a look at it, a close look, it's really interesting because they basically take HIPAA and all the other PII and data breach notification laws, reiterate it, but there's some interesting things in there, like for personally identifiable information, they now stated, and I kind of want to know who helped write that law, but they put in there, if you lose 500 records, first name, last name, and a secret question to reset your password and the answer, because we all know that we probably use similar questions, answers for our banking. You have to do a breach notification. That was never in Florida before. I think that shows just how far the laws are coming, and there's a lot more laws in the pipeline. I now communicate this law in pretty much everything I do. It's a lot easier when you're a Florida organization to refer to this, especially when it's new, and you can show it to them, walk them through it, and explain to them the risks and the fines and the repercussions, and then especially the requirements to do data breach notification. Write your training in the active voice. You don't have to be an English major, but to communicate effectively, you got to write in the active voice. I've seen policies awareness training that are in passive. Your end users must do this, period, whatever it is. This is a big thing, which a lot of people don't think about, but that really is going in a mile deep, is figuring out how to communicate better what you're trying to accomplish. Test your employees before and after your awareness to measure effectiveness. You can do those phishing campaigns. I find it really valuable to do the phishing campaign before and then implement your awareness training. and then do it after and see what kind of effectiveness. I mean, honestly, I think that is by far the easiest security metric there is. It's so hard to come up with security metrics that management can understand, or how many vulnerabilities were remediated. But this one, hands down, no one ever questions that metric. They're like, wow, look at this. You're telling me 300 people clicked and 50 people gave the password and 10 people kept trying to give the password and still log into this fake system. Process, get the buy-in from your senior management. If you don't have senior management's buy-in, again, that's a problem. In a security awareness tutorial that we built from the ground up, I was able to convince one of the top level people of our organizations to do a video. And it's interesting when you're in a larger organization, not everybody knows who the security person is, and you're walking around and all of a sudden you hear, did you hear that video? Wow, that's crazy, that video. The commissioners they're taking this seriously. We can't let anything happen to our systems. We can't let a Dane County happen. We don't want to make the news. Nobody wants to make the news in government. Nobody wants their emails on the front page either. Pilot your security awareness with your legal and HR teams. Get their buy-in. This is crucial, especially during insider incidents. You can refer back to the policies. If you're dealing in government entity where you're dealing with unions, collective bargaining agreements, this is also critical because you have to have all your documentation, and they'll immediately, if you've ever had to sit in one of those, or even if you're not in that, and you're in an enterprise, I've had this question: where's the policy? Where does it say I can't do this? Technology. Self-phishing platform, went over that already. Develop your security awareness tutorial in-house. I'm a big proponent of this. You can buy a lot of off-the-shelf tutorials. SANS has the Securing the Human, which a lot of those videos are very good. And you can, shell out the money to get some sort of pre-built one, but it doesn't speak the language of your organization and their culture. And what you find is a lot of people start to fall asleep during these tutorials. But if you can put it in your company style, and you got the video of senior management up front, and you're asking questions that pertain to them, and you can use a bunch of different things to accomplish this. PowerPoint, Keynote, Captivate, Lectora are a little bit more robust. They're more for your instructional designers, but they're not too hard to figure out. And then finally, defense in depth strategies for vulnerabilities. Subscribe to a vulnerability feed going an inch deep, but starting to go a mile deep. People, work with your internal IT groups. Walk them through a scan from beginning to end. In a lab, show them an exploit and the criticality of the vulnerability. If you just go and you run your scan, it doesn't matter if it's Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable, whatever you have, and you export that report and you throw it on their desk, that is the worst thing you could do. For my team, we go through, and I don't even use those reports. We export out to Excel, because then we can parse it later and put it in another system. But I like Excel. What I find is a lot of the IT people, the server admins, the networking people, they just want to open up the email. They want to look at the Excel document, and they already want you to go through and mark, all right, we know this is a false positive. Don't worry about this. Fix this, fix this, fix this. They go through it a lot quicker. They appreciate the time. They appreciate when you show them what the risk is, and that goes with that whole perceived versus actual risk. They work with you a lot more. I've gone into organizations where prior security person left, and I see this huge folder of just Qualys reports. And then I go to the different groups, and I'm like, what are you doing with these? And they're like, oh, yeah, we didn't do much with that because that person just never explained what to do with them, with the vulnerabilities specifically. Review false positives. That's an ongoing battle with a lot of these tools. Open up tickets with your vendor, get them to fix it, and then start with your critical servers and then move out. I've seen in other organizations, they go and they buy the new vulnerability tool, they get 6,000 licenses, and then they start scanning like crazy. And there's just no rhyme or reason to it. And then all of a sudden you're having, the service desk people run around to certain printers, and you're having the server team run around to a server that is going to be decommissioned anyways. So start with your critical servers. Where's your PII? Where's your sensitive data? What are crucial to keeping your SCADA systems online? Start with those and then move out to the rest of your organization. Use multiple tools to provide a complete picture. Every tool is different. There's tools within web app, vulnerability scanning, database, operating systems. I notice every scan is always a little bit different. Obviously, they're going to always get the main credentialed ones, missing Microsoft KB, this, that, and the other. But use different tools. We've used a lot of different tools for web app scanning, and one thing catches a cross-site script here, another one doesn't here, and one thing all of a sudden shows, oh, you have a SQL injection. It's crazy how the vendors, and they're all seem to be at the same playing field, but you just still get different behaviors and different responses from these tools, and thus you get different vulnerabilities. Use open source tools. Before you run a commercial scan, just run an Nmap scan first. You might save yourself some time. What I do is we run a Nmap scan, and then we find, okay, well, they're running Telnet and they're running this version of Apache. I don't even want to deal with doing the full vulnerability scan. I go to them and I just show them the Nmap scan and I say, listen, before we go and we ding you for this full scan, look what you're running on this machine. Upgrade the firmware. Do something. I don't want to submit this scan for you. Work with them, because you're all partners in this. Security is everyone's responsibility. It goes a long way when you do that. So, parting thoughts. The defensive side of information security is not easier for the faint of heart. I think everybody here knows that. It can be fun, though, unless you have a large breach. If you like chess, you'll like InfoSec. If you love chess, then you'll love defense in-depth strategies. It takes a lot of time and effort to go a mile deep. I'm still learning every day to go deeper and deeper, attending these conferences, going to the CTF, learning some new things that I didn't know before. I'll go back tomorrow and test and see if I can recreate that in my environment. Use your resources, your tools, your teammates, your peers, policies and procedures, and technology. My boss always asks me again, what keeps me up at night? All of this keeps me up at night. Going a mile deep, the paranoia. But, I do manage to sleep. But tonight, Game of Thrones, so I don't think I'll be sleeping. Any questions? Yes?
You mentioned a layered approach to security. You were discussing firewalls and that kind of thing. From a commercial perspective, like individuals, what do you recommend in terms of different antivirus or malware or spyware detection? Do you have any?
For individuals?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting that it always comes up to every security person here. Your family member, your mom or a colleague says, what do you do? Somebody that just doesn't know about information security. I take the same approach. I tell people, read up on these sites. A lot of business people I know, they appreciate when I direct them to Krebs. They look at the Krebs on Security blog. It's easy to understand. He just writes really well, and it's things they run into, ATM skimmers, for their businesses, things getting transferred out or wired, and all of a sudden their bank account is empty. I send them to, have your antivirus. Couple cases, if there's a repeat offender, not going to name names, my mom set their homepage as browsercheck.qualys.com, and then I just say hit that fix it button every time it comes in. Of course, you have to reduce her privileges, so I end up doing it anyways. But so she calls me and she's like, hey, it says fix it all over the place. But there's just take the same things you do day in, day out, just break it down to more of a plain language level. Again, it's a different audience when you're talking about individuals, small business, consultancies, firewalls. Pretty much tell them go with Sonic Wall or anything like that, because if I tell them to go with anything else in ASA, then I'm going to be the one configuring it. So but when they get something, I will, depending on what the situation is, I'll help review. Yes.
You had mentioned with spam vendors, their response back to user. Any that you found are more responsive as far as updating their signatures or anything of that nature? Have you seen?
Ironport, which is now owned by Cisco, has been pretty good for us, and I've used Ironport for a long time. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that I've dealt with in the past. I know Office 365, they actually do respond to you and say, oh, okay, we'll take a look at this, and then next thing I know, something similar ends up in the junk mail. Any other questions? Thank you, everyone, for listening to my talk, and thank you, B-Sides.